Hello everyone, so today we're going to learn about voluntary and involuntary action. So next, these two action is both involve stimulation, impulse, neuron, and an effector organ. Next is the differences between these two actions. Voluntary action is an action that we are conscious and involve somatic nervous system and are controlled by the cerebral cortex. Voluntary action involves the direction of our skeletal muscle. Meanwhile, the involuntary action occur automatically and involve autonomous nervous system are controlled by the medulla oblongata and hypothalamus. Voluntary action involving the skeletal muscle. For an example, what am I doing right now, which is talking. This voluntary action involving the skeletal muscle and are controlled by the cerebral cortex. Next is the pathway of the information. For an example, in the class, the teacher giving you a question and you wanted to raise your hand. So how will you voluntarily raise your hand? So the first step is the stimulus occurs when the teacher questions pupils. The pupils receptor receive the stimulus and transmit the nerve impulse to the cerebrum through the sensory neuron. That the cerebrum interprets the nerve impulse to be sent to the effector. Fourth, the effector, which is skeletal muscle, receives the information. And lastly, the pupil raises his hand to answer the question, which is the response.
So now, I will present about involuntary actions involving skeletal muscles. But for this slide, I will focusing more about the 3-neuron reflex arc. So, what is involuntary action? So, several situations require immediate and spontaneous action. For example, if you accidentally prick your finger on a sharp pin, you will move your finger immediately without much tug. This is known as a reflex action. So what is meant by a reflex action? A reflex action is a fast response stimulus without being controlled by the brain. The nerve pathway involved in a reflex action is called the reflex arc. The reflection action of moving the finger from the sharp pin involves 3 neurons and communications between the neuron in the peripheral nervous system and the spinal cord. So this is the pathway or the reflex arc. And this is for the example when the pin prick your finger. So I will explain about the picture just now. When a finger is pricked by a sharp pin, the sensory receptor detects the stimulus and triggers a nerve impulse. The nerve impulse is transmitted along the sensory neuron to the spinal cord. In the spinal cord, the nerve impulse is transferred from the sensory neuron through the synapse to the relay neuron. From the relay neuron, the nerve impulse is transferred to the motor neuron. So now you can see that there is a 3 neuron. Just now that is relay neuron, sensory neuron, and motor neuron. So and lastly, the motor neuron transfer the nerve impulse from the spinal cord to the effector, that is a muscle tissue, so that the finger can be moved quickly. So what is the importance of reflex action? There are 3 importance of reflex action. First, to produce spontaneous response without waiting for instruction from the brain. Second, the additional time that is needed by the brain to analyze the information can cause to serious injuries. For example, when you are touching the hot kettle and you realize it, when you don't have a reflex action, you will have to get more time to send the information to your brain and to analyze the information, and the time that being taken will surely make your hands to be burned and then injured. And lastly, since reflex action involve the spinal cord, the brain can focus on higher level thinking.
Two neuron reflex act. Another reflex action is the knee-jerk or patellar reflex. This reflex uses the nerve pathway that involves two neurons. That is sensory neuron and the motor neuron. Okay, alright, first of all, let me see the sensory neuron. Okay, this is the sensory neuron over here, and the motor neuron is over here. The doctor sometimes tests the effectiveness of someone's nerve system by tapping on the knee using a rubber hammer. Alright, first of all, let me see this. When the tendon below its knee chip is knocked, the quadricep muscle stretch and stimulates the stretch receptor to trigger the nerve impulse. The sensory neuron transmits the nerve impulse to the motor neuron in the spinal cord. The motor neuron then transmits the impulse from the spinal cord to the quadricep muscle. The quadricep muscle contracts, causing the leg to jerk to the front. And that's how two neuron reflex arcs happen.